You know, all that misconduct we've seen in the FBI and the DOJ and all of the people out there complaining about it, well, they're not upset about the actions of these agencies. They're just upset about it because Trump. Everything's Trump's fault, including this new sentiment and disdain for our intelligence agencies. Trump is starting it all. That's what CNN says about this. They say, you know, he's causing more threats. It's not Christopher Wray testifying and lying through his teeth to all of us. It's not what Congress is trying to demand and that the FBI is stonewalling over. It's none of those things. It's Trump calling out a political weaponized prosecution against him by his political opponent that's causing all of this madness in this country. And so the primary season is heating up. We see that this is going to be a strong new narrative here. Trump is dangerous. And I'm very concerned about this because I think that they're going to use this to try to hold Trump in custody. And I know that sounds dramatic now, but so did indicting Trump. And here we are at that threshold. Trump is weaponizing threats against the FBI. He's weaponizing his base against prosecutors. And what does that mean? That just begs the question. They've got to do something about it. They've got to shut down the internet or censor us in some way, shape, or form, or ban you, deplatform you, or any other things that they've done that we've covered here. So CNN is upset about this. And after Christopher Wray testified in front of Congress, we had a couple clips here from @TomsElliott, great follow on Twitter, and he is sharing a couple of these tweets from CNN. They're upset about Trump calling out the FBI and the DOJ. It's dangerous.
Fodder for Republicans out on the campaign trail where you spend a lot of time. And when I say this, I mean the FBI is the enemy. The FBI is weaponized against Republicans.
Everything we say here, yeah.
So it is not surprising that they are actually using their power of the gavel to have a hearing, oversight hearing, which they should be having. Okay. And there should be oversight of the FBI and every other agency in the executive branch. But to specifically kind of check off the grievances in their playbook.
It's stunning, really, when you think from campaign cycles gone by that Republicans are questioning and so sort of anti-law enforcement. It's sort of mind-bending that we are at this point, but we absolutely are. And at every Republican...
Which is a great development, actually. I'm very happy about this. I've long been a little bit skeptical of law enforcement, obviously as a defense attorney, but this is not law enforcement per se, right? This is the federal government's law enforcement. So they're talking about two separate things. I think many conservatives would look to state law enforcement and say, we're okay with state cops and state law enforcement. It's the federal agency that's been weaponized. So he's creating a little false straw man there that all conservatives are against law enforcement. No, we're okay with law enforcement. We want to live in a nice, civilized society. We don't want madness and looting. We don't want to live in Paris or San Francisco. So we'd like to have some order. We got a problem with a weaponized, corrupt FBI, buddy.
In campaign event, every Republican candidate really running for office at any level, there is this skepticism built in of the FBI, of the government, of law enforcement because of Donald Trump. I mean, that's what we're talking about. So this is a manifestation of the Trump era here. Look, I'm not sure anything was accomplished this morning in terms of advancing the ball at all aside from just question after question being asked about this. It's almost a pro forma. A Republican candidate has to do this now. They have to question the FBI, but never mind the people who are actually working in the FBI.
They should. It's a right thing to do.
A couple of them get headlines for some of their roles in investigating the former president, but the vast majority of them are, hardworking Americans, many Republicans, some Democrats, et cetera, some non-partisan. And it's a little depressing, I think.
Well, and you heard Wray this morning revealed that the FBI had to set up a new unit to focus on threats against FBI personnel.
Oh, no.
Because of this.
That have increased because Republicans have gone after the FBI for lots of reasons, but primarily since they went into Donald Trump's house to get classified documents that he refused to give up.
Oh, man, the corrupt FBI is getting so much criticism from America that they had to create their own little protection racket to defend themselves against American criticism, which now they're rephrasing as threats, okay? Like it's crossing that threshold again where it starts to get a little bit nerve-wracking because they're saying that legitimate criticism of the FBI is now something that warrants apparently the FBI creating a response unit to deal with it. So it's troubling, but it goes on. Another one from TomsElliott says that this is the result of Donald Trump's America weaponizing the idea that the FBI is out to get average Americans. Which they are. I mean, they went after a bunch of regular January 6ers. Hunter Biden's running free. So I don't know what these people are talking about.
Fire all the Yeah, listen, I mean, this is part of essentially sort of two Americas, right? The Republican version of the FBI
that's right. No, it is two Americas. Different versions of prosecutions. You nailed it.
Part of essentially sort of two Americas, right? The Republican version of the FBI is that it is a weaponized agency, that they are going after Catholics, that they are going after parents who are complaining at school boards. And you see, as a result of that, people who are campaigning for president saying they're going to defund the FBI, that they are going to fire all the officers and sort of build it from the ground up. This is a result, as you said before, of, sort of Donald Trump's America, weaponizing the idea that the FBI is out to get average Americans, particularly going after Republicans and conservatives.
But God forbid there be an actual domestic terror event or something where the credibility of the FBI is important for all Americans across partisan lines to have trust in the institution. I mean,
like what? A January 6th? I think we might have less terrorism in this country if we have less FBI.
That's the real risk here. The risk is that it's going to be more difficult to recruit people to join and stay in the FBI.
Good, get a real job.
More difficult for Americans to have confidence and faith in the FBI's work.
Do something useful.
Is something of an urgent matter that involves the protection of all Americans. Matt Gaetz, you played the clip talking about how Wray has less credibility than Hoover. I mean,
he does.
Probably percentage-wise, technically true for a couple of reasons. Every institution in America, from the press to the Supreme Court to the military, is under stress. But also Republicans are actively campaigning to undermine the credibility of the FBI.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in fact, we make it a huge portion of this entire show.
Absolutely. And look, I just want to say that it is the job of the United States Congress to have oversight.
Right.
And there are questions. I mean, Wray admitted that there was a mistake made in the Richmond office when they deal with the Catholic Church. But the question is, is everything at an 11, to quote Spinal Tap, which I know you love to do, Jay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes. So just amazing. They're all a little bit shocked. I mean, how is this happening? I mean, I thought the FBI and Christopher Wray were all just trusted and true institutions that nobody ever questions, of course. Campaign primary season heating up. Chris Christie was on with Anderson Cooper talking about Christopher Wray's performance. And he says, he did a great job. We'll only listen to a little bit of this guy because we just can't tolerate how he sounds.
And some people are legitimately asking questions. I thought
a little bit,
Ken Buck today was legitimately trying to get to the bottom of some things and did it in a way that was smart and respectful and got information back. Some people are there just to perform on both sides of the aisle, right? So Chris is a big boy and he understands this. Let me say from my perspective, first off, this is a guy who has been nominated by two different Republican presidents and twice confirmed by the United States Senate, and not one Republican United States senator voted against him either time. Secondly, this is somebody who understood, as he said in there today, the faults of the Comey FBI as laid out in the Durham report. That's why he fired every member of Jim Comey's leadership team out of the FBI. That's why he brought in a whole new leadership team and put in place a whole bunch of reforms that he detailed today.
Have you seen any evidence that under Chris Wray, there's been weaponization of the FBI?
I've not.
No.
Now, look, it doesn't mean that there might be at times individual FBI agents who go rogue. And that happens. 38,000 employees.
Yeah, go rogue. All right, so he's playing nice with the feds. I wonder what they're going to offer him for his role there. And here is Pence. Pence is also joining in on the fray. He says, maybe Donald Trump should have conceded earlier and this whole January 6th thing would have never happened. And we wouldn't have needed to have this conversation about the FBI.
I can honestly tell you, I know it's of great interest to many of you in the media, but it's just not what people were talking to me about on the ground in Iowa or when I've been in New Hampshire and other states around the country.
Are people talking to you?
Here in Indiana.
People are talking to you?
One voter actually did bring it up to you. She was of the belief that
we played that
you were
clip.
Essentially the reason President Biden was in office. You corrected her and said you did not have the authority to overturn the election that day. You didn't have the ability not to certify Biden's win. You just said that you believe the American people will hold Trump accountable. You have said that you do ultimately believe he'll be held accountable for that day. Does that mean you say that he'll be held accountable by the voters, not by the criminal justice system here?
I'm just saying that's what I would prefer in this case. But I respect the rule of law, Caitlin. I mean, you know where I stand on the Constitution. You know where I stand on the rule of law. I want to let our judicial process work, and I want to be respectful of that. But at the end of the day, I trust the American people. in this matter. And it would just be my hope that ultimately questions around that fateful day would go to the American people. And I got to tell you, you're right. There was one person that brought up the events of January 6th and my actions that day.
Busted, Pence.
But just one. We did 12 town halls in 10 counties, and I have to just tell you, I was frankly grateful that she brought it up. I think there's been some misunderstanding that persists to this day. When President Trump has continued to maintain that I had the authority to overturn the election, but I had no right to overturn the election. And I know that by God's grace, we did our duty under the Constitution on January 6th. And but honestly, Caitlin, it just didn't come up as we traveled around, because frankly, the failed policies of the Biden administration have weakened this country at home and abroad. The American people are desperately concerned about those issues affecting their lives.
I understand that you're saying voters didn't bring it up.
They're not really looking in the rearview mirror, and that's where I'm staying focused too.
I understand that you're saying it's not something that gets brought up a lot by Republican primary voters, but when you talk about your actions on that day, you're often praised for the actions you took that day, standing up to the pressure you were facing to take actions that you say you could not take, that everyone says you didn't have the ability to do. But do you ever wish that you had spoken up sooner, that you had come out and publicly conceded the election in the weeks before it got to the point that it got to, that you had said something before then?
Well, honestly, Caitlin, I had frankly hoped all the way up to the waning days before January 6th that President Trump would come around on this issue. I'd seen it many times. You talk about times that we disagreed when I was vice president. I'd seen the president take a hard position on an issue and then take the opposite position and then engage in a debate back and forth. And I'll never forget that Monday night right before January 6th when he stood before a crowd in Georgia at a rally. And I had been in Georgia earlier in the day rallying folks for that special Senate election. And I remember he said, Mike Pence has got to come through for us, and if he doesn't, I won't like him so much. And then he paused and said, no, one thing you know about Mike is he's always going to do the right thing. And I remember in that moment, Caitlin, thinking maybe he's coming around and starting to see that the people that had told him that I had some authority that the Constitution simply did not give me, nor should ever give to any one individual. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. But it was not to be, and sadly things went downhill from there. But I had hoped all along the way to persuade him of the rightness of our cause and our position. Let the process work in the Congress. Let the objections be heard. You remember Democrats brought objections to electoral college votes in 3 of the last 4 elections.
Okay, so I want to pause here for a minute. So we are getting very, very... Mike Pence is not a dummy. He's being very careful here, but we're splitting hairs on this a little bit. And I want to get clear on this because he testified with Jack Smith, and that testimony is going to be used against Donald Trump in the J6 prosecution. But here, we're not talking about the problem being the contesting of the election. All right, I want to be very granular with this. He is saying that it was okay for Donald Trump to object to the election. He just wanted the objections to be heard on the floor of Congress, and that we were going to have the hearings on it, and then that was going to be a formal process. Let it play out in Congress. He's okay with that. He was only upset with Trump urging him to make the decision when he was opening up the ballots and counting the electoral votes. All right, so it can easily be lost that we could argue, or somebody could make the argument that Pence is saying that all of Trump contesting the election was a problem. I don't think that's what he's saying here. He's saying the only thing that was a real problem was that he had the power unilaterally to accept an alternative slate of electors, which, by the way, we agreed with based on the interpretation of the statute. And I know many probably disagree with us on that, but we read through it all here and we said, I find it difficult for him to thread the needle on it. I think that he could have. I don't think that it would have been illegal if he had done that because the law is ambiguous on this, but he didn't. And I think he took the default interpretation, which was the standard interpretation, but I think he could have gone the other way. And I don't think that necessarily would have made it illegal. It would have been a historic breaking of precedent, and it would have signified that there was a serious problem with this country's elections, which of course there are, and it would have caused a little bit of a change, and it would have resulted in, a major breakdown, which is why he didn't do that. That's a separate issue. Now we're asking ourselves, the reason why his testimony is important is because I'm curious about how it's going to be used against Trump in a criminal proceeding. Don't know how that's going to be used yet because we don't know what he said. But in this interview, he is giving us some hints at what he's talking about. He disagreed with Trump in Trump's handling of this crisis or of this challenge. and that Trump was adhering, right? The reason why this is important is Pence is deviating himself from the standard of care. They're going to say that Trump did something that no reasonable person would do, that was knowingly, reckless, or something that was misconduct. And it's misconduct when you deviate out of the norm. A normal person would do this, a criminal would do that. So Pence is saying, I am doing the normal thing. Trump was the deviant. And that language, the same testimony he's giving here on CNN, I'm guessing is the same stuff he gave to Jack Smith.
That Republicans had prevailed. There's nothing wrong with that process happening, but I'd always hoped that the president would come around and recognize that we did our duty that day.
That day was much different. But don't you think it would have had an effect if you had come out in mid-December when it was very clear the Electoral College had certified Biden's win, if you had come out and publicly conceded the election? Why didn't you do that?
Well, I wanted to be respectful. Remember, we had about 60 lawsuits that were working, some of which were still in the courts.
A lot of them were thrown out by then.
In the immediate days before January 6th. Well, yeah, a lot of them were not, too. That's the reality is I wanted to respect the process. I wanted to make it clear that I was going to do my job
Congress could make their
as
case
the presiding officer over the Congress, as my 47 predecessors had done, and as vice president, serving as president of the Senate. I think we did our duty. By God's grace, we did our duty that day. And I must tell you, I was very moved by that woman who asked me at the town hall meeting about it, that she later told someone on your network that she appreciated that I was a man of faith and said she'd consider voting for me nonetheless. So,
yeah.
I welcome the opportunity to talk about the record that we built under the Trump-Pence years, but I also welcome the opportunity to talk to people about what I understood to be my duty, and that if I have the great privilege of being president of the United States, I'll always keep my oath to the Constitution.
All right, so they're trying to squeeze a little bit of testimony out of him, and I think some of that testimony, as it matures, will not be good for Trump, but we'll see what Pence actually said. The media and many people in the primaries blaming Trump, saying he's weaponizing this whole process. Not the fact that they're weaponizing the process, but Trump complaining about them weaponizing the process is the real weaponization.